All right. Hi guys. Today I just wanted to talk to you about something that I've been thinking about for a while and I haven't really talked about it. And it is the difference between having a baby at home with a midwife and at a birthing center with a midwife. And I've actually been able to experience both now. And so I've been thinking about it for a while. My youngest is 7 months old. And so I thought that I could share a little bit of the differences if you're wondering which one would be best for you. So I have 4 kids and 3 of them were born at home with a midwife coming and helping us at home. And 1 of them was born at a birth center with a midwife helping us there. So in my state, there are 2 types of midwives. There are certified professional midwives and there are licensed nurse midwives. And I'm not going to get into the differences because if you're interested in it, you can go look into it and what your state offers and everything like that, because this isn't a political or a legal video whatsoever. This is just from my perspective as someone who's done both. I've never had a hospital birth. I've never had a birth with a doctor or a like a birth center that's in the hospital. So I don't have any experience with that. So I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know. So basically, my oldest daughter is going to be 7. And so it was quite a while ago that we found a midwife who would do a home birth, and we decided to do that. So my first pregnancy and my first labor and everything, delivery, was with a midwife at home. And she was actually in our area, so it was really nice. She wasn't very far away, and it was a very good birth and everything. And then we used that same midwife for my next 2 children, even though we moved, and she was a good distance away. She still helped us out. And then we moved again, and she was just too far. And I also liked the idea of not having to have my house ready for the midwife. Not that it's stressful or anything to have someone else here. I just know that when you've got 3 little kids, if you have 3 little kids, the last thing I want to be doing is getting the house ready every day, thinking about, oh, I could go into labor. I just didn't want to do it. It wasn't a priority of mine. And so I kind of thought, you know what, I kind of want to have a center birth. And there was one option in our area. It was about 30 minutes away. And so we decided to take that route. We actually had insurance that they took. And so it was less expensive than the home birth, believe it or not, which is usually never the case, especially if you're paying out of pocket. It's not going to be the case, but it was cheaper than our home births. So we decided to do that with my youngest. So that's kind of the history of why we did it. And really, I mean, by the time you have your 4th kid, I think you're pretty comfortable in knowing what's going to happen. I mean, every labor and pregnancy and delivery is different, and you know that, but you also know your own limits and your own power, and you kind of know what to expect to a certain degree. And so that's why I just thought I kind of want to do something different. I think it'll be easier to just do it this way. And I wasn't really that nervous about doing it that way or anything. There was a midwife in the area. There is a midwife in the area that does home births, but it wasn't something that I just wanted to do this time. And again, it wasn't because I was against doing home births at all. I have had 3 great experiences with it, and I think it's wonderful. I just didn't, and it sounds so petty, it really came down to the fact that I didn't want to have to prepare my house for that moment. I wanted to enjoy all the time with my 3 kids that I could up until starting labor. I didn't want to keep thinking, oh no, I gotta have everything clean, I have to have everything organized, I'm gonna have, you know, all these people around, and my house is gonna get probably trashed simply because I'm not cleaning it, I'm not doing anything, and I'm in labor for who knows how long. So that was the only reason. That was the only reason why I didn't want to have another home birth. Was I just didn't want to deal with that aspect of it, because really, I mean, wherever you go, you're still going to be going through labor. So that didn't bother me. So that's kind of the backstory of why I have 2 different stories, why I have 2 different choices. So the basics for me the differences in prenatal care were really, really different. This was the biggest difference, was how prenatal care was handled. With my home midwife, she was a certified professional midwife. I went to her house once a month, you know, and then as you get closer, you go twice a month, and then you go every week, you know, until you have the baby. And we would meet in her office, and it was cozy, and it was at her house, and it was just a wonderful experience. And she had toys for the kids, and we would sit on the couch or lazy chairs, and we would talk, and then she would do her midwifery things. And it was very casual and very comfortable. And the whole point was to build this rapport, because of, if you've studied midwifery or if you are looking into it, the whole point is that the mother knows what she's doing, and she is in control of her labor and her delivery, and she knows how to have a baby because her body knows how to have a baby. And so really it's about having a good relationship with this person that's coming into that situation to help you in ways that you may not foresee or may need help with. And so it's a very empowering thing to have a midwife. With my first labor and delivery, she had another midwife there who was more experienced, and an older midwife from another area who I hadn't met before. And with my second daughter, she came by herself. And then with my third child, she brought a student midwife with her to help out. And out of those three experiences, I liked the one where she was by herself the most, because I had a better relationship with her. I had been talking to her for the last 9 months and met with her, and that was important to me, that I trusted her in that space when I was having my babies. So now, prenatal care with a midwife at a birthing center. The midwife that I met with at the birthing center was a nurse midwife, a little different in the way that they do their studies. And she's also under the authority of a doctor at a hospital, which changes everything. So this is why it was the biggest difference, because she had to follow hospital guidelines, which you don't always want to do. And so with her, I had a lot of blood work done. I had a lot of testing done. According to the way that the hospitals require certain tests to be done, like HIV tests and glucose tests and what's another one? All of the sexual diseases have to be tested. I know I don't have any of those diseases, and the fact that they have to do it, I think someone's making money off of that, right? It's not me. I'm paying for it. But, or I guess the insurance companies are paying for it too. But I had to have a lot of blood work done, which I didn't have to do, you know, with my other midwife, or I could opt out of things. So the balance of control was very, very different. When I went into the situation with the nurse midwife, even though she was a midwife, she was in the prenatal sense, she was more of a nurse, to be honest. That's kind of how I felt. She was doing the bidding of the hospital and the doctor. And that was very obvious for me as someone who had come from having a professional midwife at home to this setting, because it was very institutionalized. But I kept telling her, because she kept apologizing, like, I know this isn't what you think of a midwife and everything. And I kept saying, but I understand that if you come from someone who had very, very structured hospital births, this would be a good medium for you, you know, to get away from a lot of the things that maybe you didn't like working at a hospital or having a baby at a hospital. This is a step away from that. And so I understand that there is a big want for that and a big need for that. And I'm so glad that they offer that. It was just the opposite for me. It was more work for me than before. So I just had to eat a bite of a cookie, didn't I? So that was the big difference. I also had an ultrasound. I had to have an ultrasound with her because that's how they wanted to do the date, because with them, they were very serious on the age of the fetal age of the baby. And so that's kind of what they stuck it on. And I didn't go in, I didn't have an ultrasound until I was far enough along that I felt comfortable with it. And obviously that's up to you, however you decide to do your prenatal care, right? There's so many options and so many reasons and all the research and everything to make your choices how you think you should do it, because it's your body and your child. And I never had an ultrasound before that. And so we had one, and it was basically just to make sure to set a date, because they were very serious about the date. And if the baby came too early, then it was very serious to them and they had to follow hospital protocol. And if it came too late, you know, then it was hospital protocol as well. So then that's kind of how the big differences were with prenatal care. Another big one was, I mentioned before, we would meet at the certified professional midwife's house. With the nurse midwife, we would meet at her office in the officing area of a hospital. And it was very much a hospital setting. You went in, you sat in the waiting room, you waited in the waiting room for like 30 minutes. And they did have a little couple toys for the kids. And I would always go in there with my 3 kids by myself, you know, this big pregnant lady. So it was kind of a stressful situation. It wasn't a comforting situation. It was, you want to get in and get out. And then you would sit in the waiting, and then you would sit in the room, and a nurse would come in and check your vitals and your blood pressure and all of that, ask you how you were feeling, have you, you know, use the bathroom, test your urine. And then after about probably 45 minutes, the midwife would come in and she'd spend about 15 minutes with you. Sometimes longer if you had questions, but I really didn't have any questions at this point. And then I'd be done. And I felt like I got an idea for who she was, but I wasn't as connected with her as I was my previous midwife. The environment just didn't create it. It was a very, very sterile hospital environment. And I'm not even against hospitals. I mean, I think that emergency medicine in America, which is where I live, is fantastic. But the one reason why I did pick this woman as our midwife, and I think they had in their little grouping, there were like 3 midwives, and I only ever met her. I don't think I ever even met any of the other midwives. Oh wait, no, I met one once. But the reason why we picked her is when we initially went to have like what they call like a meet and greet, to see if you meet up with this woman, if you have a good connection with them and want them to be your midwife. It was right around lunchtime, and we had waited a long time, and my kids were getting very antsy and very hungry, and my husband was with us too, I think, at this one, and they were getting very hungry and very antsy, and she brought out 2 clementines from her own lunch and was sitting there talking to us and peeling them with this little cool tool, and peeling them and feeding my kids clementines. And that was my first experience with her, and it was a very good initial experience, because to me that meant midwife. You're going to go get your food and you're going to feed my kids, and you are going to have that older woman, elder type of mentorship of care that is like a code, I guess, of being a midwife, you know. And I liked that, and that for me was when I said, okay, I can do this, because if she'll do that, that's the type of person that I want. So I think she was very accommodating. She seemed like a very kind, compassionate woman, which is what I saw in that first initial visit, which is why I chose her. But everything else was very, what I would consider just standard hospital practice, and I did not like that. So between the 2, I preferred the home birth prenatal experience with my certified professional midwife. Going on to the actual birth, they were more similar, because, I mean, obviously, I guess I don't really have to say much about you have your baby at home. That's pretty much it. The midwife comes, she hangs out with you, she spends time with you, she checks you if you want to be checked, she encourages you however you need to be encouraged. I'm a woman who wants to be left alone until I'm ready to push, and then I say, help me catch my baby. And that's about it, for real. And so I needed someone who would do that, and she did that. And she was just a strong energy in the house, a strong presence in the house, but she wasn't overbearing, and she was very helpful. And I would say for the birth at the freestanding birthing center was similar. Now, obviously, the differences are I had to get up, I had to know when to leave, which I've never had to do before. I had to know, okay, this is real labor, and I need to leave now. And then we'd have to get in the car, and I had everything packed, and we all got in the car and we drove 30 minutes. And I remember saying, I don't know why women would do this to themselves, because driving in a car while having like labor like contractions is awful. Why would you do that to yourself? It's just awful. So I get to this freestanding birthing center, which is just right up the road from the hospital. My midwife's already there. Another midwife's already there. Like 2 other nurses are there because there's another woman there having a baby. And they have 4 beautiful rooms with a tub and a bathroom and a bed. And it's a beautiful, beautiful birthing center. Kitchen, living room. My kids settle in on the couches. My husband's watching them. And I think I was only at the birthing center for like 3 hours. Not even joking. And part of the strep A thing is that you need to have antibiotic, at least 1 round, but she said hopefully 2, but I was really hoping to not have more than 2, and that's my own choice. I'm not recommending anyone do that or whatever. Like I always say, you know, do your own research. Don't listen to why I do things. Do it yourself. But I did have my 1 round of antibiotic sitting on the chair there, hanging out with my kids, and then I went back into the birthing room by myself. And I sat on a bouncy ball thing, one of the big yoga balls, because after each child I realized that I keep having worse and worse back labor. I don't know if anyone else is like that, but you know, I think my midwife actually left, which is super funny because with my first labor, my midwife actually left and went home and had dinner and came back, and she came back right in time for me to push with my first baby because she didn't think I would be that quick. And the same thing happened with my last baby. She went to take her daughter somewhere, and she said, you know, there was another midwife there. There were 2 other nurses there. I'd only been there for 2 hours. I think I was only measuring like 5 centimeters when she left. So I had, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you got time, la, la, la. And so she left, and then like, I don't know, like I could hear the other baby in the room because the mother had just had the baby, which was a cool thing. So obviously when you have a baby at home, you're the only one, right? There was another woman having a baby a wall away from me in the other room, and I couldn't really hear her screaming or yelling or anything, but I heard the baby cry. And I remember that because I was leaning up over this bed having contractions, laying there on the bed praying that it would be gentle, you know, not get that much worse like we all do when we're about to give birth. And I heard this baby cry, and it was really interesting because it made me happy, and for them that she was finally out of the pain and everything that happens when you're in labor. But I just remember thinking, this is really unique and this is really interesting, because I don't even know in a hospital, do you hear other babies cry when they're first born? And it kind of made a special little marker of like, I'll probably never meet that child, but I heard its voice, you know, when it was first born. I heard that, and I was kind of going through the same thing. So it was one of those little markers in time, you know, that you have those that you keep in your heart, those little markers in time where something happens and you're just like, that means more than just what's going on now. Like, that's something that lasts forever. And I thought that was really special. But it was only about 15 or 20 minutes after that my baby was born. And I actually told my husband, I called him in and I said, go get the midwife. I'm going to push this baby out. And he brought a nurse in because they were busy with the other mother. And I think my midwife was still gone. And I said, I'm ready to push. And she looked at me like I was crazy, because I was just sitting on this ball, still fully dressed and everything. And then my midwife came in and they started getting the bed ready and saying like, okay, how far along? And I'm like, I've got about 30 seconds before I have another contraction and my body's telling me to push. So this is happening right now. And they said, well, where do you want to have it? And I said, in the bathroom. And I definitely had my biggest baby very quickly. in a standing squat, which I recommend because I've done that twice now out of my 4, and both times it has worked perfectly, and I'm not that sore afterwards, and I don't have any issues afterwards. And there was a 2-pound difference between both babies that I did that with, and it was the same result. So that's my method of choice right there. And so I had my baby a few minutes later, and I was laying in bed after that, starting to nurse. So I was only there for about 3 hours. I had my baby about 20 minutes after the other mom did. So that was really special. But that whole situation felt a lot like my home birth, because I set the pace and I set the tone and I said, I'm ready. And they said, okay. And they jumped into action, and then I was done. Now, the only difference with this one was that there were 2 other nurses there. And there was one nurse whose whole job was the aftercare with me. She helped me go to the bathroom. She helped clean me up. You know how that goes. Handed me my clothes if I was using the restroom, changing and things like that, asking me how I was doing, checking my blood pressure, while my midwife and my husband were with the baby. And then the other nurse, you know, was helping me clean up, you know, how they put all the pads on the ground and everything. And so there was a little bit more of that, but they were all very respectful with, you know, staying out of your way. I mean, we had a little queen size bed, or like a twin bed. No, not a twin. What is it? Double bed. And all of my kids were piled up on it, and me and the baby. And they didn't have any issues with it. And they all kind of waited to see if the baby would nurse and left us alone. And then a few hours later, we went home. And so that was the most like a home birth. And I have no complaints at all about how that went down. I mean, it was so quick that I had to wait for my bread to be made, because something they do is they bake you a loaf of bread and they have it going while you're in labor, kind of like this end cap to all of your work, and then you get to take your hot bread home, or you get to have some there. And I actually had to wait for my bread to be done before I could leave. Well, I guess not before I could leave, like they could have just said you don't have to have it. But so we hung out for a while, and then we, right when the bread was done, like we wrapped it up and we left. That's how quickly it was for me. And then what comes next? The aftercare. Now, with my certified professional midwife, with my home births, she had already known my home. She knew where I lived. She came, I want to say she came 3 days later, and then a week later, and then she'd call. And she did a great job. It was very, very well, like the whole thing was. It's professional, but it's very, very like a friendship, like comforting relationship. Come on in. She already knew where everything was. She'd been there. On the 3rd day, in our state, you're required to take what's called a PKU test. In Indiana, you have to do what's called a PKU, which is after 3 days, they prick the heel of your baby, and they test the blood for a whole lot of diseases and things like that. And so on the 3rd day, the midwife comes and she does that, and it's always done in a very, very gentle way. I mean, as gentle as it can be when you're poking someone's skin and taking their blood from them, which isn't really, it's pretty barbaric, but in a very kind and mothering way, like these midwives are. And it's just kind of, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Checking your blood pressure, seeing how you move around. But it seems a lot of it is they're not asking questions. They're just kind of watching the situation. And that's really what I get from these wise, older, home birthing midwives, is that it's mostly observation and picking up on cues that that the mother doesn't realize is going on, or so you don't have to ask all these questions, and it's like pandering, you know, when you go to the hospital, they have to ask you a million questions about stuff. It's more of just this natural response of like a wiser, older woman kind of looking after you. And I really, really liked that. And then with the and then with the nurse midwife, she didn't come to my house. 3 days later, a nurse came to my house, that one of the nurses that was at my labor, and who I had not met before then. came to my house and did a hearing test and did the PKU and kind of, you know, asked some questions. How are you doing? How's nursing? Yada, yada, yada. Was here for maybe about 30 minutes. And it was awkward and uncomfortable because I didn't know this woman and she was just coming to my house and I didn't know if she was going to be like, your house is messy, or, you know, why isn't this baby proofed, or what? I had no idea. I mean, she was very nice and she was very professional, but I didn't know her. And it wasn't like a meeting of this woman who had just had this whole experience with you and had a very, very spiritual experience with this new human being that was just born. And just the intimacy was not there at all. But she did what she was supposed to do. She was very good at it, and then she left. And then 6 weeks later, where I would normally either meet with my professional midwife or she'd call me, I actually went to the office of the nurse midwife this time, and we all drove up to the hospital, or not the hospital, the offices in the hospital, which made me a little uncomfortable because the last thing I want to do is take my healthy newborn baby to a hospital that's full of diseases and bad bacteria and stuff like that. But we went and we waited the same amount, everything, and then when we went in there, I think I just held him, and she kind of looked at him and said, you know, how are you doing? How's everything? Fine, fine. And then she wanted to set up a gynecology appointment with me, and that was it. And then I have not talked to her since, and I don't know if I ever will. I mean, that was pretty much it. Now, the other thing that was different was since this is connected to the hospital, and since she's a nurse, they have these weird protocols where they have to know who your pediatrician is, and you have to have a pediatrician appointment before you can leave and things like that, which was really strange to me, and I wasn't used to that. And she did a really good job getting me in with the pediatrician of my choice, who's very hard to get in with, and setting that all up. But I think for me, the things that I didn't like, and I don't like, is this sense of like, you are under our authority. And that really rubs me the wrong way, especially as someone who's had 3 babies under my complete authority. When I hire a midwife or a doctor or something like that, I'm putting myself under their knowledge, but I still have full authority of myself in my labor and my children. And so I went in knowing that I was putting myself under a lot of their rules and regulations that they have to work under. But that didn't mean that I liked it. So it was things like that I just didn't like, because it's like this underlying idea of you don't know what you're doing, where when you work with a professional midwife, or at least when I did, it was, you know what you're doing because this is who you were born to be. You know, you're a woman and you have babies, and your body knows what it's doing, and I don't have to tell you how to do it. You know, and I respect that and I appreciate that, because it's true. One of the most empowering things women can do is give birth on their own terms, in their own way, because that's like the core nature of a woman's body in the birthing experience. And so to do what someone else tells you to do is really bizarre to me, and I bet it really bothers a lot of women. It might not bother all women. Some women might be really comfortable being told what to do and really enjoy not having that responsibility, but I think there are a lot of women who want that. So that's pretty much the pre, during, and post care differences. And then just a couple special things that were really different. Yeah, like I said before, were the setting up the meetings with the pediatrician, which my professional midwife had nothing to do with, because it was none of her business. We'd hired her to help me with my labor and delivery and my care and things like that. We hadn't hired her to find me a doctor or find my child a doctor or set something up, because that's not her specialty. That's not her field of practice or anything like that. So it didn't even make sense for her to have anything to do with that. And then the testing, like I said before, is just different. She didn't do a hearing test. If we wanted to do a hearing test, we would go get a hearing test done. You know, if we wanted to do this, we would go do that. Where the hospital already has these things set up. So when you go to a nurse midwife, you're set under those regulations that the hospital demands. And you can either do it or leave. And so it really sets up this idea of you're playing by our rules or you have to go somewhere else. And it's unfortunate that women feel like they don't have any other options. I have to do what this establishment has decided I must do, even if I don't feel that it's right for me. So, yeah. So, anyway, am I upset by either one? No. Would I do a center birth again? Maybe, because I've already done it before, and so I know what I'm going into. I know all of the riffraff that goes into doing the prenatal care, and in the end it was cheaper. With our insurance it was cheaper, and I didn't have to clean up anything. I didn't have to do any of that work. And like I said, the main deal, the whole labor and delivery, was a piece of cake, considering what labor and delivery is. I mean, obviously. But with everything around labor and delivery that can make it worse, there wasn't anything like that. It was just it in its raw form for all 4 of my births. And so I can't say that either choice was bad. If you're someone who's been doing hospital births and you're used to that environment, which I don't know firsthand, so I can't even start talking about it because I just don't know, but you're looking for something that is a little more hands-off, a little more relatable, maybe having a baby that's not in the hospital, but also close enough to the hospital because you're just not quite comfortable being away from a hospital, a freestanding birthing center is a phenomenal choice. It's just a great medium for those hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, you know, of women who say, I don't want this extreme and I don't really want this extreme. I want this marriage in the middle that gives me this comfort I have of being under hospital guidelines while also being able to labor however I want without medication, without someone on my back all the time, and just do what I do. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful mix. But then again, if you're a home birther, if you're a hospital birther, you know, the key is choice, because it's up to the mom. No one's going to say, okay, you can't have your baby right now, because your body's going to do it when it needs to have a baby. It's just one of those things that happens, and it's your choice, and it's your power. And it's a powerful thing, and it's a very empowering thing. And so I think that whatever choice you make, you know, find the one that empowers you the most to do your best for your child and for your body. Because it's one of those defining moments in your life as a woman when you go through labor and delivery and you come out the other side, and because you're not the same. Whether it's in a good way or a bad way or a million different ways, you're just not the same. So yeah, so those are the 2 big differences that I noticed between having home births with a certified professional midwife and a freestanding center birth with a certified nurse midwife. Those are the differences and the similarities that I've had. Have you guys ever found anything that I didn't mention between the 2, or do you have good or bad experiences with either? Or, you know, I'm not sure why you would have found this video unless you were looking for differences or similarities. So if you have anything else that you'd like me to talk about these things, I will. I don't know how big of an interest people have in home birth or prenatal care with one or the other, or a birth center birth with the different midwife, or just doing your own prenatal care with either, or your postnatal care after having antibiotics while your child was still in the womb and while you were going through labor, which is a big deal. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do any videos over those things, or if you have any questions. I'll try to respond and not make this video like an hour long because you can talk about a lot of stuff when it comes to these events. These are the events that last forever. So hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye.